I'm not starting with a sketch. I really don't know exactly how I want to do my page today, but I am, of course, starting with some photos and a story. These photos are of our little squirrel that keeps coming and stealing food out of the bird feeder. This has been going on at least 2 winters, maybe 3. I've kind of lost track, and you can see my cat really has the squirrel in his eyes there, and I thought this was really good pictures considering I took them through the window. But our squirrel only has one eye. You can see his good right eye in this photo, hopefully, and the left eye, he's blind in that eye. So my husband has started calling him the pirate as he comes and steals the bird feed. And so I have my lettering. I've done that much, and I get very few opportunities to use these really giant letters, and I probably ought to get rid of these things, but I have a tendency to, I don't think I overbuy stuff, but I keep stuff forever, and I have this whole box full of all of these letters. And these were in a Christmas present years ago from the scrapbooking set from Sam's. And they're great letters. They have this wonderful embossing to them, but they're very hard to use. And I've got all kinds of other really large letters here. They're organized by in the alphabet here. And every once in a while I pull something out of there. But I decided that I wanted the title to be really prominent. So I pulled the letters out, but I don't really like them in the colors they're in. They're not bad, except there's too many of one color and whatnot. So I'm thinking about painting those. So that's probably what will happen with those letters. For paper, I have gone to a crepe paper collection called Acorn Avenue, and I loved these papers because they were I thought, so versatile. As far if you hadn't told me the name, I would have never known it was fall collection. They do have some jewel tones in here, but there's also some very springy kinds of things. There's a watercolor paper of all things. A real variety of papers, and there's not an acorn to be found or anything else fallish until you get over to the stickers. And Crate does really good border stickers, but there are a couple of little squirrels and some acorns in here, so I'm probably going to do something with that. And the colors, I think, are really nice for my photos, at least some of the papers. So I've picked out, or I've started to pick out, some papers. I know this one is not it, too busy, but I liked this paper, these hexagons, and I like this really frantic kind of looking chevron, because the squirrel coming up just generates all kind of energy. The cat sits there and his tail just goes like crazy, and you know, we eventually run the squirrel off the feeder. We let him eat a little bit. I mean, we don't run a one-eyed squirrel off right away, but if we left him, he'd eat the whole thing. So so it just goes on like every day in the winter. And but there are some really good papers here, I think, that pick up the energy that I want to convey on this layout. I just haven't quite decided how I want to arrange them. So these are my products.
Well, I do know that I want to paint my letters. So to do the painting, I'm going to take off this top layer because it's kind of hard to paint over this. So I'm just peeling that off with a craft knife, and then you're left with some nice plain chipboard, giving that a good coat of paint. Usually one coat will do it. And I try to get around the edges as much as I can when I'm painting chipboard. I didn't have the perfect shade of red, so what I did was just blend a couple of colors, a rosier red and an orangey color, to get this sort of tomato red color. And once those were painted, I felt like they were such large letters to just be in a solid color, so I'm adding some gray to the bottom of them, just kind of roughly applying it and then brushing off the excess with paper towel. And that gives them a little bit more rustic look.
Okay, I figured out what I'm going to do with the layout. I typed up my journaling, And I haven't printed it yet because I don't exactly know how much room that I want to take for it, but I know that I'm going to have some text up at the top that leads into the title of the pirate and then the rest of the journaling underneath. So I decided to just do everything in a column, so you just come straight down the page, and that led me to create this sketch. And I like these kind of layouts where you have some photos and then some strips of journaling or tapes or ribbons or whatever going above and below them. And something that I've been seeing a lot on galleries and blogs are using strips of chevron paper or tapes or whatever to create arrows. And sometimes people do triangles and they put rows of triangles. So I'm thinking of doing something like this to point out, because the image in this photo is really small. So I want to direct the eye to this and this. And it also goes with the theme of the layout where the cat sort of alerts us to the presence of the squirrel, and sort of our eyes then go to the feeder. And so it kind of suggests the movement and that direction. And that goes with these papers that I have. To do my little arrows, I'm looking at this particular paper, and I'm thinking of doing some fussy cutting and cutting these into strips or into squares, and then making some arrows with that. And then I also have some chevron paper that came in this collection. So the next thing I'm going to do is cut my strips of paper and start to lay out the photo. Actually, before I do that, one other thing is when I put the sketch together, I noticed that it needed a little bit something else to soften it, and that's where these drops of mist come in. So actually the next thing I'm going to do is add some drops of mist to this background, more of a tone-on-tone kind of thing, not really contrasting.
So to cut up this paper, I'm just cutting along the design using the whitest part of the thickest white lines of the paper, and going along the edge, and it ends up cutting almost in two, but I'm keeping them together at this point, kind of going all the way around to see how I like this look. It's kind of an Art Deco paper, but it does give those arrows kind of appearance. And what I end up doing is actually cutting them apart, because I decide that they look like they're falling apart anyway, that they would be better maybe laid over one another to create the arrow effect. I'd also like to try taking some of the paper and not cutting too much around the edges, and just seeing what it would look like in a strip with a point on the end. And I think I like that as well, so I may do a mixture of different arrows. And now I've got my papers laid out, and I'm starting to play with the arrows and seeing where I'm going to put them. I try the small ones there and the larger one up at the top, but I decide that the individual ones might look better up at the top, so that I can have that one long strip there on the left side of the layout, because that's got a little bit more room. I took some of the chevron paper and just cut it into strips so that it creates an arrow type effect. And based on the sketch, I had the arrows on the right there above the title. I don't have a whole lot of room there, and I also have this little squirrel thing to do something with, so I'm going to move those down so that I have a place to rest my embellishments. So the set of arrows on the right is going to be further down on the layout. Also, the other thing about that squirrel is he's very orangey brownish, and he just doesn't quite go with everything else. So I'm trying using some markers to color him, and that's not working out. I may try some colored pencils on him to see if I can get the color to come out better. I'm also going to need to put some arrows down there on the right side, and I haven't cut anything yet. So I'm looking to see whether I want to cut a long strip or some individual ones. Now my matte paper, I'm just using some green cardstock, and one thing I like to do when I'm using cardstock along with a lot of pattern paper is give it a little bit of extra oomph with a background stamp. This is the sanded background stamp from Stampin' Up. Any kind of textured looking background stamp works really well for this, and I'm just stamping over at one time with some slightly darker green ink, and that will give the paper a little bit of a textured look. That will create a little bit more interest, and I may trim a little bit off of it too. Alright, now what I ended up doing with the squirrel is I've got some white ink, and I'm just sponging over the white ink just to tone the color down. And that helps him a lot, so he's not so bright. He just didn't really match any of the rest of the stuff, but if I sponge over him with the white, it kind of makes it blend in a little bit better, and I can still use it. Alright, I've put my journaling on, and I've attached my rows of arrows, and you'll notice I'm kind of going out to the side a little bit. I really don't want everything quite in a perfect line there. I think it needs to spread out a little bit. So I'm moving some of the journaling over, and I'm going to ink the edges of it. Now there's my squirrel, and he looks so much better now that that white ink is dried. I heat set that a little bit to help it out. The other die cuts I found in the pack were acorns. My squirrel steals birdseed, not acorns, but it's close enough for an embellishment, and I have a cute little sticker there. I don't know what brand that is. I know it came from Hobby Lobby. It says "Delight in the Small Things," and it matches the green papers that we have. One other thing that I'd like to add is a little something more. Well, first of all, I've got to put some letters in here. My journaling leads into saying "The Pirate," so I needed to add that in. And I've decided I want to do some stamping. A friend sent me this cute stamp set for greetings for cards, but I'm going to use it on my my layout. She die cut some words for me since I don't have a the Big Shot die cutter to go with it, and it's going to say "You are in my thoughts," and or actually, "You fill my thoughts." And I'm testing this on a scrap piece of the green paper to see how it comes out. That would be that the squirrel fills the cat's thoughts. But I thought it was a cute addition to the left side of the page there, because that embellishment area just didn't have quite enough going on in it. Sort of fill that space up. And I got to glue all of these things down. One last thing I'm going to add in terms of embellishment are some buttons. I have some wood buttons. These were part of a Christmas collection. I don't even remember the brand. But they're things like that you can buy from Christmas collections you can use anytime. They're just buttons with red and green thread in them. And I'm going to use some of the red and the brighter shades of green that go with my layout, and spread those around in the 3 different embellishment areas that I have. That'll create my visual triangle. And now my page is complete. So you can see my word with the painting on it, the 2 photos, and some journaling above and below. All the paper is down in a column with a little bit of mist to help accent things. The arrows that I created using the one paper, and then did a few embellishment groups around that. So it kind of creates a frame around those photos and leads your eye to the photos and to the journaling. Got a few things hanging off the edge of the column so it doesn't look too structured. And that's my page. So I'm going to show you a few close-ups here. I hope you'll visit my blog. Oh, I did leave one thing off that was on the sketch. I had a little row of like scallop trim, and I just didn't feel like I needed that. Okay, so here's some close-up views of the page. And thank you for watching today.